Hello to everyone and welcome to our podcast of Dare to Know Yourself. In this episode, we'll talk about conflicts and how to understand your brain when you are in this situation. For that, I'm with Daniel van den Pol. He's a psychologist here in Senius and he has a lot of experience working with conflicts. Hello, Daniel.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
That's great to hear. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. What is a conflict?
Well, a conflict is basically like two positionings finding, an intermediate position where they clash. And, conflict is to be expected because everyone is different. And that difference, be it familiar differences, cultural differences, but also maybe even the way that you approach the world. Some people are more intuitive, other people are more rational. It's depending also on how we communicate that we'll find differences which inevitably lead to misunderstandings, and that can lead also to us assigning a certain value to different areas of life that we, because we live with a partner, end up sharing, and therefore we also have to come to a certain consensus, or maybe lack thereof, which is also a reason for conflict.
Okay, very interesting. And in light of the brain, when is the best to engage in conflict resolution?
Well, we are talking about brain power in the end, right? And our brains, funny fact, consume 20% of all our body energy. And it's to no surprise because we have almost like 86 billion neurons. Wow. Like crazy.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. So if you think about conflict resolution, if you want to do it right, then this will take energy from you. And if you think about what are the most suitable moments of the day, well, then I would say that the least suitable would be right in the evening when you've already used all the energy of the day. And maybe sometimes that's precisely when you find the time. Hey, guess what? I am thinking about something that happened in the day. Why not discuss it in bed, right? Well, maybe my idea of a lovely evening is to turn off the lights and say, we'll talk about whatever tomorrow. So why are we dealing with this now?
Yes.
Maybe my predisposition, my openness, and even my willingness is not going to be at my best point at that moment. So if you think about exercise also requires energy. So you wouldn't go and exercise right after having a meal, right? You need to do your digestion, etc., etc. Well, the same thing here applies. What you need specifically, and this, although it sounds maybe standard, it's still very important. You need two things to be able to engage in good conflict and considering the when. Basically, when you're well fed and when you're well slept. As easy as that, okay? Those are the two main income sources of energy for our system. So if you have not eaten, eat first. And if you've not slept, maybe even get yourself a little nap if necessary before you engage in conflict.
That's it. Take a little rest and then we will talk.
Exactly.
Okay, and knowing this, how does the conflict manifest in our brain?
Well, there has been many research done in regards to the brain. We have a lot of unresolved questions, but I like to start with a view of the brain, which is the tripartite brain, which is like the triune brain, and this actually goes back to 1960, where Paul MacLean, he was the first in introducing this concept. And although some of his theory has been debunked or has been questioned, the idea of there actually being like three main layers to our brain has still had an impact in research. And basically, this triune brain talks about three main areas. And I'm going to start with the most basic one, which is also considered to be the oldest one. It's called the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain is called that way because we share it with reptiles and snakes. And this is the part of our brainstem, our cerebellum, and other areas of our brain that are in charge of very instinctive processes such as breathing, heart rate, and also balance. And from there on, we go until a second part of our brain, which is called the mammalian brain, which we share with other mammals. And this is mainly compromised of our limbic system. And the limbic system, in a nutshell, is in charge to a large extent, of our emotional processing, our emotional life. And there you have different elements in the brain, different parts in that very part of the brain, which you have, for example, the amygdala, which is the main threat detector. You got the hippocampus, which is our main source for memory. And then you got the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is basically in charge of sending or inhibiting hormones into our bloodstream, which also later regulates our autonomic system, which is basically also in charge of activating us if we need to get activated, and deactivating us when we need to go back to a process of calm. Now, this one is going to be very interesting. This one is also a very quick responder to whatever comes in. It makes a very quick analysis of the data that comes from outside. And although this might seem like a lot of maybe theoretical data I'm giving you, and we're even talking about couples, and it's like, so why are we going inside the brain instead of outside the brain? Actually, knowing what is happening inside the brain helps you to be able to communicate better and not be sort of like impeded by your very brain. So anyway, this is the limbic system. And then we go to the latest edition, which is the neocortex, or the primate cortex, which is what we share with primates, therefore its name. And that's where most complex structures of the brain are situated. Those are in charge of cognitive functions, such as executive functions, decision making, problem solving, also social functions, like how can I be socially acceptable in a certain situation, emotional regulation. And this one also works, but in response to whatever comes in, the limbic system will give a very quick assessment. Okay, if I, for example, if I see something on the ground and it's moving, then maybe I see something in the form of a snake, and my instinct reaction would be to fly away, right? But then later on I realized, you know what? No, it's nothing. It was just a shadow moving.
Or whatever.
Exactly. So our limbic system gives a quick assessment, and this is what is called also the quick route. And the quick route, if we really feel like we are in a threatening situation, the quick assessment that is made overrules whatever the slow assessment would be. And the slow assessment is done with more information, because when you're problem solving, a good problem solving strategy is to take into account different options. And our problem solving strategies, that's more related to our neocortex, and specifically a part of that neocortex, which is the prefrontal cortex. Now, very interestingly, about the prefrontal cortex, this was actually discovered a long time ago and accidentally. There is a very famous case called, it was a guy who was working in train tracks, and he had to basically enable the train tracks to go through rocks and whatever other obstacles it could find. And this was back in 1848.
Long time ago.
A long time ago, indeed. And we have had much research ever since. But anyway, this unfortunate incident, and very unfortunate also for the person involved, they basically had to use explosive powder to get the train tracks along and to enable its continuity. So he basically is at the site. They explode a specific portion, and as they explode this specific portion, something gets out of hand. They actually had to fix this with metal poles, and one of these metal poles, as the explosion happens, it just flies away and goes right up into the face of Phineas Cage and gets out of his forehead. Well, and actually on the top of his head. crazy thing is, you would think it was a metal bar like 3 centimeters thick at least, and over a meter in length.
Wow.
And it came with such power that it came in, and actually then it took a flight of 22 to 25 meters in the air after that.
Wow.
The thing is, so he gets this incredible blow, falls down, takes the hit, and you think, well, this guy is basically dead, like that you won't survive that, right? But actually he stands up, he takes his own work, and he basically allows himself to be seated, and they take him to a doctor, and he himself, with perfect speech capacity, tells the doctor, well, doctor, you know what? You got work to do.
Wow. Like nothing happened.
Like nothing happened, exactly. Except for, although he had kept many of his mental and cerebral functions, something was identified that had changed. Because he suddenly had to change what they said in personality. Because where before he was very responsible, he had great social skills, suddenly he became a very impulsive person. And even the ladies were no longer allowed to be with him, because he would say quite obscene and even sexual comments, because even though he experienced a diminishing in his sexual libido, he did say inappropriate sexual comments. And therefore, what they realized there is how important not back then, but over the years of research, is how important the prefrontal cortex is in inhibiting some of the information that the limbic system sends. Because maybe I'm like, I receive something from my limbic system that says, ooh, danger. But it is not dangerous at all. Or, ooh, I'm really, really angry. So I can lash out now, or I can say, oh, wait, I'm actually going to wait for a moment. You know? So how does this information extrapolate to conflict resolution, right? Well, first of all, it's understanding how your brain works in terms of the signals and the information that it sends, and how you interpret whatever is happening. And also the time that it takes, because we talk about a quick route, which is the primary assessment, and then the slow route, which is basically my prefrontal cortex sending a sign back to my limbic system saying, wait a moment, don't react. Let's wait. Let's look at all the information that is here, and then let's proceed to a proactive choice. There is a theory which I find particularly interesting, and I use this both with couples but also in individual therapy, which are called the 3 motivational systems. And this comes through Gilbert in a manual from 2014. And he is also a person who uses compassion-focused therapy. Now, these 3 motivational systems talk about different motivations that all have their function for survival, for social connection, even connection with ourselves. And it's looking at in which motivational system am I operating now. So one of the motivational systems is called the threat system, which you could say, hey, that's part of the limbic system, right? That's part of the amygdala there. And this alerts me of, ooh, danger. And this doesn't only have to mean that I see a tiger. It might mean that I'm about to send an email.
Right? An email,
Like, oh man, is my grammar correct? All the orthography in order?
Am I forgetting something?
I'm forgetting something.
Go for
so
it.
go. Right. Well, basically, so you can have, based on your experience, some situations might be triggering for you, and you might experience a threat in this very situation. And and this system basically looks that you go for safety or that you seek security. If you do not want it, then another great way, I'm saying maybe survivally, with a survival intention, is to basically avoid it. And hey, a lot of people avoid conflict because they just don't like conflict. No, conflict does not feel nice a lot of times. You have to deal with unpleasant emotions. Maybe you feel like you're getting angry. Maybe you're disappointed, sad. A lot of these unpleasant emotions what we rather not have. And especially if I'm going to go into these very unpleasant emotions and feel like you're not going to resonate with me, you're not going to understand me. Even you're going to get right at vulnerability. So why on earth would I be open with you? Why would I even engage in conflict, right? But that's part of the threat system. I anticipate threat out of your response. So I anticipate a negative response to whatever I'm going to say. So maybe I prefer not to deal with it. But then other people, instead of avoiding, they say, well, actually, you know what? I have a very quick solution. I mean, let's just be rational for a moment, right? And it's like, oh, you know, today it didn't go really well at work, and I felt like you should definitely talk to your boss. I mean, come on, step up for yourself, step up your game. And it's like, yes, but then it's like, no, it's just as easy as talking with your boss. And I'm not feeling really understood here. But the other person maybe feels like I am already offering something that brings down the anxiety that maybe this tension is bringing on. So, this is difficult for you. And maybe therefore as a partner it's difficult for me. And I'd rather have you solve it so that we both are not dealing with any tension at the moment. And this person, if a person goes into reactive problem solving, which is not problem solving taking everything into account, because you don't have all the evidence, you don't know how the other person is going through the situation, which emotion this person is feeling, right? Then you're going quickly into the other system, which is called the activating system, or otherwise defined as the drive system, because it drives you. And the drive system basically looks for resources. And one of the main guys behind this is dopamine, which is also involved in drugs, right?
That's right. That's right.
So it gives me a quick solution and therefore quick resolution, and the anxiety appeases, right? So the drive system is good. We all need it. It looks for resources. It's what gets you up in the morning. What motivates you for further training. It gets you to do things with your life, things that are life-giving for you, and that's great. The drive system is absolutely necessary, just as the threat system is. But we are maybe forgetting about the third motivational system, which is called the soothing system. If you think about soothing is something that it calms you down, right? It's also called the calming system. And the calming system basically helps you to connect with yourself, which means, what am I feeling? What do I need? And what are maybe possible vulnerabilities that are at stake here for me? And then also helps you to connect with others. It helps you to practice empathy. It helps you to make proactive decisions with more evidence and with a combination of both the emotional information and the rational information. Because sometimes you might think, and it's like, oh, well, you're just way too sensitive. And that can get you into dynamics of, well, you know, we have the rational guy and we have the irrational person. You know, emotions have a rationality of their own, or a rationale of their own. And I think that's worth taking into account. Even in the prefrontal cortex, there is one part called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and that's where the limbic system connects with the prefrontal cortex. And that's been called the feeling part of the rational brain. So all our decisions have a part of feeling, because if you take feeling out, then how the heck are you going to have motivation? You need feeling for motivation. So basically, the calming system is one that helps us to make decisions that are proactive, that are not reactive in order to reduce the tension. Because sometimes we're adding more tension by the very fact of trying to eliminate that tension. Now, how do I get to the calming system? Because that wouldn't be maybe my most instinctual response. Maybe I'm more prone to either avoiding or to going directly into my drive system. Basically, we need to understand, I was talking about the autonomic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system has a sympathetic part and a parasympathetic part. And when we say sympathetic, we might believe that might be sympathetic towards us. It's maybe not perceived exactly in that way. The sympathetic system is basically the one in charge of activating us and ensuring also when we have the fight or flight response, in response to a danger, to enable our body to get the oxygen it needs and to prioritize our attention to get away or to confront that danger as quick as possible. The parasympathetic system is the one that later brings on the balance again. And you can do that, and we talked about this calming system as the soothing system, by soothing yourself down. And soothing can take different forms. You can basically engage in deep breathing. And deep breathing basically means I'm not shallowly breathing and getting a lot of oxygen into my body, because maybe I'm getting more oxygen than I need. I actually get the right amount, so that also the carbon dioxide that gets into my system where I need a good balance in, they are kept in balance. And you can also do other things. Maybe if you prepare yourself a nice cup of tea, or you just get yourself away from thinking too much about whatever is making you angry. Because funnily enough, you might say, okay, well, if I'm angry, lashing out, that's me releasing my anger, right? Well, yes, but in conflict, it's not particularly helpful. It usually pushes the other person away more than drawing the other person close. So it's actually a lot better to deactivate and actually take your focus off whatever is making you angry, because in the way that you're still on it, you are gearing yourself up. You're getting even more activated. So it's better to basically move your attention away from it. And that's a way that we get to the calming system, which is, it takes more time and it also takes more effort. Okay, and you can have some grace with yourself in saying, if I don't manage this directly, fair enough. It's something that you need to learn.
That's it. I mean, it's hard, but it's necessary. It's worth it.
It's worth it.
Because if you don't understand why it is caused, you cannot manage things correctly.
That's right.
So that's very important. So thank you. And okay, so coming back to the when and bringing all this very information about how the brain works, bringing it to the conflict resolution, when should we keep arguing and when should we stop?
Well, that's
Where's the border?
That's a very good question. So we all have like a window of tolerance of what we can tolerate, right? So I can be talking with you and we might have a disagreement. Some conflicts have to do with disagreements. But we can talk about, hey, I'm seeing your point of view. Okay, no, I don't see it exactly that way. And it's like, if you just take this into consideration, but hey, this is important to me. Okay, we're talking and maybe it's like, no, I don't see it that way. I might get a little bit fed up. I might start getting a little irritated or annoyed at my partner. Maybe you're starting to get dysregulated. Maybe you're starting to feel like you're starting to talk a bit quicker. But there comes a point where you might become emotionally flooded. And this is something that Gottman, the relational expert, talks a lot about. Why? Because if you get emotionally flooded, then it's sort of like what Daniel Goleman talks about is the amygdala hijacking. Remember the amygdala? The amygdala, the one that detects the threat? Well, because that's a quick route, the amygdala overrides what maybe your prefrontal cortex could be saying. So your prefrontal cortex is going to be less activated than your amygdala. So if you get to that point, no matter how much you insist on what you want to do, you cannot take perspective, you cannot practice empathy, and you'll very possibly need to listen to your partner. You'll stop having the capacity to listen. All you want to have at that moment is like, I want to be heard, I want to be seen, I want to be taken into consideration, and you need to see my point of view now. Because I feel very angry, I feel like this is really undeserved, this is really unfair, and my focus is on what is unfair. And unless you recognize it to me, I possibly won't reduce in intensity. So once you're there, and you might feel that in the way that your heart rate increases, you might even feel like you speak quicker, you might raise your voice, you might tremble, all these things, which basically is you finding yourself limited and maybe facing a wall. And it's like, we're not getting anywhere. Exactly, you are not getting anywhere because you're both in your own positionings and there is a certain degree of unflexibility to that. So to become more flexible, you sort of like need some time. And this is where I in couples therapy talk about timeouts. Timeouts basically are not like carte blanche for one of the partners to say, you know what, I'm out of here. Avoiding is the greatest thing. Ignorance is bliss, right?
Actually, it's not.
No. Right. Timeouts, when effective, are done with a time constraint into consideration. So what is recommended is that this is no longer than 24 hours. Minimum 20 minutes, because you need at least some time to deactivate. And you can do this in different ways. You can either release by doing some intense sport, maybe intense gym, going for a walk, going for a run, going for a jog, whatever you want. But you can also do something soothing. You can maybe prepare yourself a cup of tea, take a warm shower, take a warm bath. I don't know, maybe you want to do something that you like, read a book. I don't know up to which point you will be able to do that, but hey, maybe it works. Maybe it works, right? But the key is take your attention off and also enable your system to go back to the soothing system. Because if you do not go back to the soothing system and you're in the drive system only problem solving, it's very likely that you're problem solving only from one perspective without being able to take into consideration the one or the other. So that would be the main takeaway. Timeouts, minimum of 20 minutes, maximum of 24 hours. And then timing is also very important, that you ask your partner, hey, when would it be good for you? Because right now I'm getting flooded. And this is something important that takes a bit of vulnerability from your end too, like admitting I'm getting flooded. Because maybe you feel like, hey, my partner can use that against me, right? I am being humble right now. I am taking the low route and I'm saying, hey, I need some space. But if the other person can respect that, then you can get to another point where maybe you're able to both listen better to each other.
Okay, very interesting to know, to have this into consideration, because it can be very useful to get to a better point. And knowing all this, what are some of the possible whys of the manifestation of the conflicts in our brain?
Right. So if you think about, we just talked about brain power, right? And brain resources. So your brain is going to maximize the route of less effort. So exactly, I'm gonna save my resources. If I don't need to use more, then why would I look at a different perspective if I already have? You know, it's easy, right? We all want to maybe think in categories because that's easy. If we need to have a lot of information in our heads, like how can we be thinking about all possible scenarios, right? We all make quick prejudgments and they serve to a certain purpose. But I don't know if you've ever had that with a person where you maybe already complete the phrase for another person, oh, I know exactly what you mean. No, you don't. But we do say it, right? Why? Well, because sometimes we are right.
Yes.
Sometimes we do know the other person. But in this sense, yes, it's the route of less mental effort. And also, I really like this. There is an author, and this is something that you could also check out for yourselves. It's a TED Talk by Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she talks about like how we are not at the mercy of our emotions. Like they don't necessarily need to control what we're doing. We still are the managers of our emotions. And she says that basically our brain works sending predictions. And these predictions are based on previous experiences which prepare you for the environment now. And we do so with a lot of things, right? Even your studies, it helps you to put yourself into situations where you can problem solve based on what you know. And that's useful. Great. But some of our predictions are incomplete. And especially when we talk about the quick route versus the slow route, the quick route will make incomplete predictions. And knowing that it is possibly an incomplete prediction, part of going towards saying, how can I best respond to this, is clarifying. Hey, did I actually get all? Because maybe I'm jumping to a conclusion too quickly. So, yes, and also just knowing that you're going to have specific triggers. And what might be triggering for you might not be triggering for your partner. So you might make predictions differently. And sometimes it is nonsensical to your partner.
That's it. But you have to understand it.
Exactly.
And that's the challenge.
Right.
Okay, and how can we manage the conflicts?
Well, in one word. Well, sorry, two. Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence basically means I am aware of my vulnerabilities. I am aware of my needs and my desires. I'm aware that there is a specific emotion behind what I'm doing. And emotional intelligence also means I need the slow route. I do have in me, and we all have, the emotional regulating capacity in our prefrontal cortexes. However, it takes effort in saying, I won't naturally and reactively go there. And sometimes you need to stop. Maybe sometimes you start escalating. Wait. What just happened?
Yeah.
What just happened? This is getting nowhere. Okay, I'm gonna breathe for a moment. Okay, wait. Maybe you need a timeout. Maybe you start getting dysregulated. Maybe you can still cope, but you just wait. You just wait. Okay. And I try to see if I can take perspective of why this is important for the other person. Now, some ideas here are that if there is something that is very conflictive to you, that there is a high disagreement on, if you're getting fed up, then leave it at that moment. Choose a time, and then navigate that conflict by, once the person starts sharing, you basically ask for clarification. Hey, did I get that right? I heard you say this. Is this what you said? Because maybe that's the first part of communication. If I'm missing what you said, then I'm definitely going to miss the interpretation. This happens a lot with me with my wife. I'm already like, my mind goes like 1,000 kilometers per hour, you know? And I'm just, maybe I share something that makes no sense to her because I have processed it before, but I just give her the final snippet. And she's like, what does that even mean, right? So we cannot take for granted what we communicate.
And following with this, how do you balance the emotions and motivations of your partner?
Right. Well, in that sense, the first part is asking for clarification, which you basically can paraphrase or give back what you did here and ask, hey, is that what you said? Because that's the first. If we don't start with that, then the remaining parts of your question wouldn't be possible. The other part is saying it's validating, which basically says, although I don't agree, although I don't see it from your very point of view, I understand that for you, given your circumstances, how you were built, your personality, your experiences, this makes sense. And you know what? It makes sense to me. I can understand why you would see it that way. And finally, practicing empathy. Empathy would be saying, I understand the underlying emotion for you. I understand that would make you feel frustrated, unseen, unvalued, and I see you. Because sometimes we feel unseen by a partner, right? So those would be the basic tools: clarification, validation, and empathy.
Okay. And to finish, we've seen how the conflict is caused, how it is processed in our brain, all the steps, how to manage the best way. And once it is kind of over, how do you follow up after resolving a conflict to ensure its lasting resolution?
Right. Well, I think this is a continuous conversation, and also knowing that although you have spoken about it, it might not necessarily mean that this is still not a trigger for you. Okay, so it's basically practicing a little bit of, I come alongside you with your life circumstances, with your past experiences, and I come alongside you. And I practice empathy, that this may be particularly important to you, particularly valuable to you. And in that way, we can come to a consensus and sort of like an arrangement for living with some limitations or some differences. Because 2/3 usually of issues are perpetual. They won't change. So in that sense, part of this is also saying, how can we live with the difference? Yes.
Enjoy and love those differences.
Exactly.
Because as you say, they are going to be there forever, because we are who we are. And that is not a good idea to change it. No. From the outside, of course. The change has to be
exactly. We all make consensuses, and we can adapt, but there are particular things where sort of like, how do we navigate that we possibly won't change this.
That's it. Well, Daniel, thank you very much for all this useful information. And I think it's very interesting, not only because it helps our audience manage those conflicts, but understand where it comes from, how it is caused, how our brain processes all that. And this gives a wide perspective of the situation. And I think that is the useful part of all this. So thank you very much for sharing.
My pleasure.
And see you in the next podcast.
Okay, we will.
Yes.